Say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
I do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I am the void.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
All broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. Once again, this is Lighting the Void Live. It is July the 23rd, 2024. And we're going to be finishing up. What's up, Bryce? What's up, Domek? We're going to be finishing up this book on the Tree of Life. I find it funny, and I'll tell you what I find funny, is that a lot of people want to learn about the occult and magic and all this other stuff, but when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, when it comes down into getting into the structure, like all of the scholastic stuff that you got to do to learn about it, it's not fun. And it's not fun for some people. Some people it's actually pretty interesting, but it makes you see that no matter what we do, whether it's, sports, politics, radio shows, podcasts, video games, relationships, like everything we do is emotionally driven and stimulated by, does it feel good or doesn't it feel good? But this system does show you a way, and we're going to be finishing it up shortly, actually, because this isn't going to last very long as far as the end of this book. But this system is a whole system of ceremonial magic and the understanding of it that goes back thousands of years. I don't want to say millennia, but thousands of years. But when you go into like what it's all about and all these different spheres and all these different modes of consciousness that the magicians used and the Kabbalists use and the Hermeticists use, most people don't find it that interesting because it's extensive. And then when you get a book on ceremonial magic or traditional magic and it's, you can barely wrap your hand around it because it's so thick. And you're thinking to yourself, man, I thought Hermeticism was just learning magic and astrology and alchemy. And that's exactly what it is. And it's very extensive, right? So who knew that when it comes to studying the self, the psyche, the inner worlds, all of that stuff, that there was this much stuff there, right? So we have to think, first and foremost. I want to say this because I am not a dogmatic zealot or anything like that when it comes to this kind of stuff. We do need to thank the chaos magicians for coming along and pretty much extracting everything that, in my opinion, everything that works practically. I'm not saying you can't use chaos magic for a system of spiritual development. You definitely can. That's the beauty of chaos magic. You can do a lot of stuff with it. But they took the time to evolve magic in a way to where a lot of the older dogmatic stuff may not really matter. They took out the stuff that was useful, that was practical. So we'll get into that later too. But I wanted to talk a little bit about a subject tonight that, you know, back in the day, it used to be a subject that you were forbidden to talk about. You can't talk about these things. It was a secret or whatever. But we're going to talk about the Qlippoth, which is the dark side of the tree. Just like anything else, there's a polarity in everything. Speaking of polarity, all you got to do is turn on social media and see how polarized we are as a human race. If it's not people arguing about Democrat or Republican or their viewpoints on stuff, it's almost like no one can see the middle ground anywhere or the gray area anywhere. Like it's fun for us humans just to be polarized all the time. So, in a sense, when you study the tree, you don't see like all the 10 videos we did before, and we never talked about any negative stuff or any. We talked about vices that certain spheres on the tree had, but we never talked about the dark side of the tree. And there is a dark side of this tree. It's called the Qlippoth. And a lot of times you'll see a picture of the tree of life and the 10 spheres on the tree. Maybe it'll show 11 if it's got Doth in it or whatever. But you'll see another tree that's inverted that goes kind of, it's dark, it goes into the ground, and it's called the Qlippoth. It's just the idea of the negative energies of this tree. Now, we're going to go into this with a little bit of what Dion Fortune talks about the Qlippoth in her book. I'm also going to go into what Israel Regardie talks about in this book. And yes, there's going to be names of like evil spirits and all that stuff. But I want you guys to really take a lot of this with a grain of salt. Because one, this is not something to get religious about. You know, because people ask me these questions all the time. I did 3 readings today, and I had one person ask me, you know, is this stuff real? Or like, are these names of these angels and demons and all this other stuff, are they real? And, of course, you know, I can't answer anything in a simple form, so I had to answer, you know, with that age-old question, what is real? You know, kind of like what Morpheus says, what is reality? And if you get into Carl Jung, you'll start to see that the imagination, egregores, things that we agree on, all kinds of stuff bring bigger questions to what reality is. Now, obviously, we live in physical reality. If I cut myself, I bleed, that's reality. But as far as like, that's physical reality. That's what happens in Malkuth, according to the Kabbalists. But when we get into names of like angels and demons and things like that, what makes them real? Were they real before we were born? You know, these are bigger questions. When I read and listen to audiobooks of people that have traveled out of body and gone to all these different realms and things of this nature as they go out of body, you don't hear them talk about too many things like angels and demons and stuff like that. It's usually just the paranormal researchers that talk about these things. But just conscious explorers that travel out of body, some of the bigger names, those type of people, you don't hear these names much. You don't hear them talking about angels and demons. So does it make it less real because of that? My answer to that question is I don't know. But why this matters is because I believe in egregores. Give you an example. We'll do something real simple here. So since the beginning of time, people have talked about the God and the devil. No one's really can prove that either one of those characters exist. You know, the loving old man with a beard and the guy with the pitchfork and the ideas of God and Satan. No one can one has or really has ever proven that those two entities exist. However, people have had some pretty massive spiritual experiences, and that's what they've written about and talked about when it comes to things in their life. God saved me. God did this. If it wasn't for God, I wouldn't have this. Even like I said the other day, when boxers win boxing matches, they thank God. So God has become a real thing to all of us. You know, you can call it source, the creator, whatever you want to call it. It gets a little sketchy when people start asking, well, what is the devil? What's Satan? What is that? Almost like there has to be in our minds. This is what we have to take notice of. As humans, in our minds, there always has to be something polar, because how can we define one thing without the other? And yet, even in the text of the Bible, God himself says, I created both light and dark, good and evil, in the book of Isaiah. So now everything's all convoluted. There's no solid truths, right? So where do these names come from? Things like Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, the etymology of these names, who knows what their names is? How do we know that these are real? Then you need to read books like A History of God by Karen Armstrong and all these other books to realize that these are all energies that we have created. We've co-created these energies together. Now, I'm not saying they're not real, like as far as an angle of light or a spiritual influence. But what I am saying is the names that we've given these things are there because we've given them to them. If we decided for thousands of years to change the names of everything and kept that for another 3, 4, 5,000 years, then that's what their names would be. So we have to understand that even if I read stuff about evil, good, whatever, that we're constantly taking part in this creation as well. And the stronger that we believe something to be true, especially the more of us that believe something to be true, the more real it becomes. Now, with all that being said, the Kabbalists practically worked upon the tree. They would do meditations and initiations through all these Sephiroth. And somewhere along the line, I don't know the history of this, but somewhere along the line, they started talking about the evil existence, the characters, all that stuff, in this tree called the Qlippoth. So what I'm going to do is maybe we'll talk about this, okay? I will read this little short segment that Dion Fortune has about the Qlippoth, go into some of the names and stuff of these spirits and things like that. And you're not going to have bad nightmares, and bad things aren't going to happen to you unless you really believe that or give in to your fear. It's almost like any other form of like psychic thing that happens to us. Most of the people that fall victim to curses and magic attacks on a bad level, right, that really fall victim to it, are the people that are most afraid of it. Again, I'm not saying that evil's not real. I'm not saying curses aren't real or anything like that. But I can guarantee you, based on my experience, the more you give in to the fear of it, the more real it becomes. And if you think I'm BSing you about that, think about anything in life that you've focused your fear into. Fear, or the power of the dark side, manifests much faster, it seems, and much more intense than the things that you desire on a pleasurable and happy or joyous level. You ever notice that? Sorry, got to coffee up a little bit. That's the bigger question. Why does fear manifest? Why do the things we fear manifest so intensely and so fast? Why doesn't it work that way about the good things that we focus on? Something to think about. So, chapter 26, the Qlippoth. And we get to the end of this. What's up, Jen? So the tree of life has a positive and negative side. So why does there need to be an inverted tree? I don't know. It's just what it shows on the glyph. Right? You have to look at, I don't have a glyph of it with me. It's a good question, though. So she says, in a previous chapter, we've referred to the Qlippoth, the evil and the averse Sephiroth. The time has now come to study them in detail, even though these are awful forms, dangerous even to think upon. So according to Dion Fortune, it's dangerous for us to think about these things and talk about these things. So if you're scared, you might want to leave now if you're listening live or the recordings. I'm not scared though. I faced harder shit in my past marriage than 90% of these demons. So it may be asked why, since these forms are reputed to be so dangerous even to think about. It is necessary to study them though. Were it not better to turn the mind away from them and prevent the images of such evil forces from formulating in our consciousness? Shouldn't we just focus, in other words, shouldn't we just focus on love and light and not even worry about this stuff? So in answer to this question, we may cite the precepts of Abramelin the Mage, whose system of magic is the most potent and complete that we possess. So if you guys aren't familiar with that, at the time, there's a grimoire or a magical text called Abramelin the Mage. And in 1888, when they made the Golden Dawn, this was the big thing to accomplish, right? So you go through all these things during this ritual. It takes weeks to do. They even made a movie about it called A Dark Song, where it kind of shows how, it doesn't show the ritual, but it shows like the processes of it. And even Aleister Crowley, they claim that he tried to do this in Scotland and failed and all this other stuff. But this was the big grimoire at the end of the day when you became an adept. You know, you went through the grades of the elements, you became an adept. You picked up this book, Abramelin the Mage, and you go through it, and it's a long, crazy ritual for sure. And then you meet your holy guardian angel. Just so you know what she's talking about. So to this question, we may cite the precepts of Abramelin the Mage, whose system of magic is the most potent and complete that we possess. According to this system, the operator, after a prolonged period of purification and preparation, evokes not only the angelic forces, but the demonic ones too. A good many people have burnt their fingers with the system of Abramelin, and the reason is not far to seek, for if we examine their records, we find that they have never followed the system in its entirety. That's human nature, right? If you guys pick up this book and read it, and then you'll see, most humans don't have the discipline to go through this system the way it's taught. So a lot of people, according to Dion Fortune, just picked out a ceremony here and there and an invocation for performance as the mood took them, and consequently, Abramelin's system has got a bad name as being a singularly dangerous formula. Whereas if you perform the whole thing in its entirety, it's a singularly safe one, because it deals with all the reactions of the invoked forces under what might be termed laboratory conditions and neutralizes them. Whoever attempts to work with the positive aspect of the Sephiroth must remember that it also has a negative aspect, and unless he can maintain the necessary balance of forces, the negative aspect is liable to come up and get you and swamp the operation or operator. There is a point in every magical operation when the negative aspect of the force comes up to be dealt with, and unless dealt with, will lure the experimenter into the pit with which he is digged. It is a sound magical maxim not to invoke any force unless you are equipped to deal with its adverse aspect. So, for instance, dare you invoke the fiery energy of Mars, or Gabura, into your nature unless you have sufficiently purified and disciplined yourself to be sure that you can prevent the Martian force from going to extremes and leading to cruelty and destructiveness. If you have any insight into the human nature at all, you must be aware that everyone has faults of their qualities. That is to say, if he is vigorous and energetic, he is liable to fall into cruelty and oppression. If he is a calm and magnanimous person, he is liable to fall into the temptations of fair inertia. I think she's talking about like laziness or something. The Qlippoth are aptly termed the evil and averse Sephiroth, for they are not independent principles or factors in the cosmic scheme, but the unbalanced and destructive aspect of the holy stations themselves. So what she's saying is, these aren't independent principles, they're just the unbalanced aspects of these spheres. There are, in fact, not two trees, but one tree, a Qlippoth being the reverse of a coin, of which the obverse is a Sephiroth. So, on one side of the coin you got Sephiroth, on the other you got Qlippoth. Whoever uses the tree as a magical system must, perforce, know the spheres of the Qlippoth because he has no option but to deal with him. It is only upon the plane of Absolute that there is but one name of power associated with a Sephirah, and that's the deity name. To the archangel corresponds the devil, and to the choir of angels the cohort of demons, and the Sephironic spheres have their correspondence in the infernal habitations. So each sphere has a correspondence, has an infernal habitation. Each archangel has like a devil or a demon or something. And each angels have cohorts of demons. So the only thing that governs the whole entirety of the thing that doesn't have a reverse thing, what she's saying, is the God name of that sphere, which we talked about in the previous books. That was a weird noise. So the student must carefully distinguish between what the occultist calls positive and negative evil. This is a very important point in an esoteric philosophy, and a failure to realize its significance leads into far-reaching practical errors and cripples the whole life and work of the initiate, or for a matter of that, of any human being who is endeavoring to develop a modicum of free will and self-governance. So we kind of deal with this stuff anyways. Even if we're not really doing magic, we're going to deal with this stuff anyways. It is a point which is but little understood, but is a singularly important point in practice because it influences so immediately our outlook, judgment, and conduct. Positive evil is a force which is moving against the current of evolution, and negative evil is simply the opposition of an inertia which has not yet been overcome, or of a momentum which has not yet been neutralized. Let us make these definitions clear by an example. Yeah, let's do that, because I'm confused myself. The natural conservatism of a mature mind is regarded as evil by the would-be reformer. The natural iconoclasm of youth is regarded as evil by the administrator who has established his system. Nevertheless, we cannot dispense with either of these opposing factors if society is to be maintained in a healthy state. Between them, we achieve a steady progress that neither disorganizes society nor permits it to sink into inertia and decay. Both these factors are indispensable to social welfare, yet either of them unchecked would lead to harm. Do you get what she's saying there? So a lot of us fringers, you would say us fringe people, would be, considered as some kind of evil to the status quo or mainstream media. But without us, there would be no balance or society. But if you just took a bunch of like fringe ideas and there was no mainstream at all that didn't balance it out, or any reality of things to balance it out, and we just took over everything, it could get extremely unbalanced and things could get crazy. The same thing with what she's saying as children, or the iconoclasm of youth. Kids and teenagers, they think for themselves, they're rebellious, they go against the system all the time, which is healthy. But if you took that same energy and you just let it go crazy, it would just cause complete chaos, right? I think that's what she's saying. So she's saying it would lead to harm eventually. So we cannot consider either of them then as a social evil unless it's overdone. We should therefore, in the terminology of esoteric philosophy, classify conservatism as negative evil when considered from the standpoint of the reformer, and iconoclasm as negative evil when considered from the standpoint of the conservative. Positive evil is a different matter. It may be of the nature of an iconoclasm carried too far and descends into sheer anarchy, or of conservation carried too far, and becoming class privilege and vested interest militating against the general welfare. Well, we already have all that stuff going on. Or it may take the form of actual political corruption, which destroys the efficiency of the administrative machine, or of social corruption, such as organized prostitution or child labor, which undermines the health of the body politic. Basically what she's saying here is we have unchecked evil and all this stuff everywhere. I think that's what she's saying. She would definitely say that now if she was alive now. The conservative impulse and the radical impulse will both draw to themselves those who are in sympathy with their viewpoints, and their supporters will soon organize themselves into political parties, and these parties are not evil, save in the prejudiced eyes of their political opponents. But the main body of the nation opposes and supports them impartially and turnabout, recognizing that they represent compensating factors. Equally, the corrupt and criminal elements in society will tend to organize a Tammany Hall of their own. So now the conservative and radical parties might be likened to, oh, dude, she's saying what I said earlier. She's actually repeating what I said. The conservative and radical parties might be likened to Chesed and Gabora, respectively. Tammany Hall might be compared to the Qlippoth, corresponding to Gabora, the burning and contending forces, and the organized diehards to the Qlippoth of Chesed, the permitters of destruction. So negative evil is the practical corollary of the principle of equilibrium. Equilibrium is the result of the balance of contending forces, and consequently they must pull one against the other, which isn't evil, it's natural, it's balance. So we must not make the mistake of classing one of a pair of contending forces as good and the other as evil. To do so is to fall into the fundamental heresy of dualism, which I'm just telling you, dualism is probably one of the biggest problems of humanity, especially our country. Just division. They just divide us so much, man. Left and right, man and woman, red pill, blue pill. It's all bullshit. But it's all over the place. The instructed and enlightened expositors of all religions regard dualism as a heresy. It is only ignorant and adherents of faith who believe in the conflict between light and darkness, spirit and matter, which shall eventually result in the triumph of the God and the total abolition and elimination of all opposing influences. Protestant Christianity forgets that Lucifer is the light bearer, Satan, a fallen angel, and that our Lord did not limit his ministrations to humanity, but descended into hell and preached to the spirits in prison. We cannot deal with evil by cutting it off and destroying it, but only by absorbing and harmonizing it. Yeah, but I mean, I know some of you guys would agree, like certain people on this earth would be better off just not breathing. That's my opinion. Certain types of people. Yeah, I'm a little harsher when it comes to that. Like I don't know if I agree with Dion Fortune here. I don't know how to harmonize people that hurt children, or people that abuse women and children, or people that hurt them in other ways, sexually or whatever. Like, how do you harmonize that? That's something I'm gonna have to disagree with. The only way to harmonize that shit is to get them the hell out of here. That's just me, though. Like, I have a weird tick about all that stuff. And you putting them in prison doesn't work. In all our calculations and conceptions, we must carefully distinguish between the resistance of the compensating Sephirah and the influence of the corresponding Qlippoth, the two trees, divine and infernal, Sephirotic and Qlippothic, are usually represented as they would appear if the obverse trio were a reflection of the celestial tree in a mirror as its base, reaching downwards in proportion as the other reaches upwards. That's what I was talking about, Bryce. It just looks like two trees meeting in Malkuth, right? And the little black spot at the bottom of Malkuth is kind of the beginnings of the Qlippoth tree that starts down, So we should get a better concept if we conceived of the two glyphs as inscribed upon either side of a sphere, so that if a pendulum swinging between Gabora and Gedula, which is Mars and Jupiter, overreached itself in either direction, so if it went too far in either direction, it would commence to circle round to the reverse side of the globe and come into the sphere of influence of the corresponding Sephirah. So hopefully you guys can understand that. So the balance between Chesed and Gabora, red and blue, Mars and Jupiter, the pendulum that swings back and forth between those two things isn't evil. It's fine. When the pendulum swings so far, and we've seen this too in our own lives. Let's just say Gabora, someone's overly cruel. When the pendulum swings so far out, that overly cruel that there's no mercy coming back to balance it, and it just keeps swinging. Then it swings around, she's saying, and it gets into the Qlippoth, or the negative forces. Yeah. So if it is swung too far towards severity or Gabora, it would come into the sphere of the burning and destroying forces of hatred. If it swung too far in the direction of mercy, it would come into the sphere of the permitters of destruction, people that just sit on their ass and let things get destroyed for no reason. And there's much significance in that name. Not people or things. I keep saying people, but. So the mystic tells us that it is his aim to work in the sphere of pure spirit without any alloy of earth, and therefore he calls upon the name of God alone. But the occultist replies, as long as you are in a body of earth, you are a child of earth, and a spirit for you cannot be without alloy. When you call upon the love of God, it cannot come to you save through a Redeemer. The sphere of the Redeemer is Tifereth, just like the Redeemer in Christianity is Jesus. So the sphere of the Redeemer is Tifereth, and its archangel is Raphael, the healer. For do we not recognize the influence of the Redeemer through its healing influence upon the body and soul? But the reverse of the Redeemer, who harmonizes, are the Zormael, or the disputers, the great black giants ever working against each other. Do we not see their influence in the harsher doctrines of Christianity, in the idea of everlasting punishment under the dominion of the devil, as contrasted with everlasting reward under the dominion of the vengeful and venal Jehovah? If these are not dual contending forces, then what are they? Modern religious thought makes a great error in not resisting that one can have too much of a good thing. The only time when there is a perfect balance of force is during a pralaya, a night of the gods. Force and equilibrium is static, potential, never dynamic, because force and equilibrium applies two opposing forces which have perfectly neutralized each other, and thus rendering each other inert or inoperative. If you upset the equilibrium or the balance and the forces are freed for action, change can take place, growth, evolution, organization can occur. There's no possibility of progress in perfect balance. It's just a state of rest. And at the end of the cosmic night, it is said that balance is overset, and in consequence, an outflowing of power takes place once more, and evolution begins again. Okay. She goes overboard in explaining stuff. We're talking about the Qlippoth here, though. So the equilibrium of the universe may be best likened to the swing of a pendulum rather than the grip of a clamp. It is not held immobile, and there is all the difference in the world between those two concepts. For in poise, there is always a slight vibration, a push and pull between the opposing forces that holds it steady. It is a stability not of inertia, but of strain. This is represented by the tree, by the two pillars of mercy and severity, which pull against each other. Gabora, severity, pulls against Gedula and mercy. Bina, form, pulls against Chokma, which is force. If the counterpull ceased, the universe would collapse. And as a man who is pulling on a rope collapses if the rope breaks, we must clearly realize that this tension, this resistance against which we have to strain and whatever we may be doing is not evil. It's just life. It is necessary. It is a necessary counterpoise of whatever force we are employing. So as we pointed out in the previous chapter, each Qlippoth arose primarily as an emanation of unbalanced force in the course of the evolution of the corresponding Sephiroth. There was a period when the forces of Kether were overflowing to form Chokma, and the second path was in process of becoming, but not yet fully established. Therefore, Kether must have been out of balance, overflowing, but not yet compensated. We see this phenomena of the pathological transition stage clearly exhibited in the case of the adolescent, who has ceased to be a child under control and has not yet become an adult and self-controlled. That's a pretty good analogy. If anybody's ever remembers their teenage years, growing up to be an adult, or or has had a teenager. Bryce King says, or like varying degrees of emotion, like anger to rage or sadness to depression. I get it. Yeah, if it gets too far, man, it can, when people get angry and it turns into hate, then hate can turn into violence, and violence turns into destruction. And I guess we have a name for this. We call those things evil. In the occult, they call it extremely unbalanced, and the pendulum is swinging so far that it's gone, But they call the same. They call unbalance evil. It's pretty much kind of the same thing. Except here you have except here you have, how some people say you should never hit anybody or you should never resort to violence or whatever. That's true, but you also have to be able to defend yourself too. So even occultists know this. Like, it's not the Christian idea is always turn the cheek, let people shoot you, let people hit you, and just don't be violent. It's kind of to an occultist that's kind of evil, because you're not fixing anything really. I know that's a touchy subject, but I understand both. But. So it was an inevitable period of unbalanced force, the pathology of transition that gave rise to each Qlippoth. So it follows then that the solution of the problem of evil and its eradication from the world is not to be achieved through its suppression, cutting off, or destruction, but through its compensation and consequent absorption back into the sphere whence it came. The unbalanced force of Kether, which gave rise to the dual contending forces, must be neutralized by a corresponding increase in the activity of wisdom, or chokma. So the unbalanced force of each Sephirah, then, which arose unchecked during the temporary phases of disbalance or disequilibrium that occur periodically in the course of evolution, forms the nucleus around which were organized all the thought forms of evil arising in the consciousness of sentient beings, or through the operation of blind forces that happen to be out of equilibrium. So, all right. So this is what she's saying. The story of these evil spheres and this evil energy that came about, how it came into being, is basically like if you take Kether that's trying to come into Chokma, okay, so on the tree, you have the first sphere of Kether and the second one is Chokma. So as it's coming down, trying to make that second sphere to balance this out, this path between the two out, right, kind of like right before it gets to the second sphere to form it, there's an increase of imbalance before that second sphere is made to balance it out. And during that increase is when these energies were made, if I'm understanding this correctly. So the unbalanced force of each Sephirah then, when arose unchecked during the temporary phases of unbalance that occurred periodically during evolution, formed the nucleus around which were organized all of the thought forms of evil arising in the consciousness of sentient beings, or through the operation of blind forces that happen to be out of balance, each kind of inharmony seeking its own place. So it will follow then that what was at first a mere overplus of a force, both pure and good in its intrinsic nature, may be, if not compensated, becomes in the course of ages a highly organized and developed center of positive and dynamic evil. Think about that. That's a trippy thought. You know how people say, oh, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Think about how many times in life people have done that. They have good intentions in their heart, and then they're real passionate about something, then they go after something, and there's nothing that balances it out or checks it, so they end up just destroying all kinds of shit, hurting people, lying, thieving, cheating. And they're like, I swear on everything, I had love in my heart. Like, yeah, you did it first. I'm just saying, I wonder if that's these kind of egregoric things in the background are influencing us this way. An example will once again help us to make this clear. An overplus of the necessary energies of Mars, or Gabora, the energy that budges inertia and clears away that which is not effective or outworn, would be certain to occur during the period prior to the emanation of Tifereth, the Redeemer. As soon as it emanated, the Redeemer would compensate the severities of Gabora, even as our Lord said, quote, a new law I give unto you. Ye shall no longer say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now this uncompensated severity of Gabora gave us the jealous God of the Old Testament and all the religious persecutions that ever have been done in his unbalanced name. It forms the Qlippoth of Gabora, and every cruel and oppressive nature is in sympathy with it, To its spheres goes all the overplus of the force that they emanate, that it's not absorbed by the opposing force and the universe, and all the unslaked revenge, all the unsatisfied lust or cruelty, and these forces, whenever they find a channel of expression opening up through it. These are all Qlippothic forces, and consequently the man who gives way to cruelty soon finds that he is not merely expressing the impulses of his own undeveloped or misshapen nature, but that a great force like a stream in spate is urging him on, driving him from one outrage to another till he finally loses it, and then he loses his self-control and his discretion, and is swept away to self-destruction by some incautious expression of his impulses. So whenever we make ourselves the channel of any pure force, that is to say, any force which is single and undiluted by ulterior motives and secondary considerations, we find that there is a river and spate behind us, the stream of the corresponding sephira or Qlippothic forces that is finding a channel through us. It is this that gives us the single-minded zealot his abnormal power. Ooh. All right, so I want to talk about this real quick before we get into the conclusion, because this book is over, but she's going to get into the conclusions of this book. But the only thing that I can relate to, where I've seen this happen in my life is, I would say, probably anger. Being an Aries, I guess, I've had times in my life where I've gotten so filled with rage, I completely lost control of myself. There was a couple of times I'd gotten it's been years since I got that mad, but maybe some of you can relate to it, or you get just so mad that you can't even think straight. Like I remember being so angry one time when I was 17 that I got into like a squab with my dad, and I was so mad and so violent. But it was definitely an overcompensation of something that had been happening to me that at the time I felt justified for sticking up for myself. And you know what? When like she's talking about here, when I did make that first impulse of balancing out whatever was happening in my life by sticking up for myself, that was good. But the anger took over. And it just kept coming and coming and coming. And it's almost like I lost myself in it. And I was so mad I was seeing flashes of light. Like it was almost like I was passing out and waking back up, that kind of mad. So usually when we stick up for ourselves or we're trying to put a stop to something, right? Like that's a positive thing. That it seems evil or bad at the time, but it's actually a positive thing. It's balancing a force that we've let run amok too much. But like she's saying, if the pendulum swings so hard and we just give in to that whole force of Gabora and severity, we can become angry and violent and cruel, even to the point of we don't care about anything or anybody. We just want to destroy shit, I think that's how a lot of us have experienced that. So if you want to look at it from a psychological level, that's how I would look at it. So here we go. We're in the conclusion. Just a few sentences here. And then I'll get into Israel Regardie's, what he talks about the Qlippoth. So having ended my study of the portion of the Holy Kabbalah, which is concerned with the 10 Sephirah upon the Tree of Life, I can find no other words to say than the little done, the undone is vast. This book will, I hope, be followed by other books. There are also the 22 paths from a system of mystical psychology being concerned with the relationship between the soul of the man and the universe. As the 10 Sephirah being concerned with the macrocosm are the keys to illumination, so are the 22 paths being concerned with the relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm, which is the key to divination. And divination, taken in its truest sense, is a spiritual diagnosis, a very different matter than fortune-telling. The spheres of the gods upon the tree is also a matter of profound interest and immediate practical application, for they give the key to the rites that were performed as a means, and a very effectual means, of contacting and balancing those different forces that are personalized under the names of the gods. All these things, however, require detailed knowledge and that can only be got together gradually. It's more than one pen can do unaided, and I should welcome the correspondence of those who are interested in these subjects, not as research into antiquity, but as living forces that come home to men's businesses and bosoms. All that remains of us, ceremonially, in the West is in the hands of the church, the Masons, and the producers of the cabaret. All three are effectually after their kind. The church evokes the love of God. Masonry evokes the love of man, and cabaret evokes the love of women. Viewed as a means of invoking the Spirit of God, ceremony is pure superstition, but viewed as a means of evoking the spirit of man, it is pure psychology, and that is how I view it. It is a lost art in the West, but an art that is well worth reviving. In this book, I've given the philosophical basis on which this art rests. Its practical application depends not only upon technical knowledge, but upon the development of certain powers in the mind, by careful and prolonged training, of which first is the power of concentration, second is the power of visual imagination. It is concerning the power of the visual imagination that we are so lamentably ignorant in the West. We could just miss the turning when he sought in prolonged attention a substitute for spontaneous emotion. And that's the end of the book. So now, when we come back after this short break, I'm going to get into the names of these Sephra. And this is going to be from the actual Golden Dawn book, the Black Brick, so to speak. If I can find it, I know it's here somewhere. I have to find it, but I'll pull it up during the break. And I hope it doesn't freak people out. No, I got it right here. Here it is. I don't want to get into it before the break, but it's not anything to worry about. It's just names of all this stuff. It's interesting, though. Everybody likes the evil, scary stuff, so we'll talk about it. I personally don't think you should even be messing with this stuff, goetic spirits or Goetia or invoking demons of any kind, just in my opinion. If you're taking the, you don't have to agree with me, but if you're going down the realms of like magic and stuff, I don't think you should mess with it until at least you've mastered the elements, at least till you feel like you've mastered the elements, you know. And even then, some people still don't mess with it, but just my opinion. Be right back after the short break.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Bumper stickers are a fun side hustle with low-cost investment that has built-in advertising to attract local customers in parking lots, rallies, gatherings, conventions, venues, and more. You could potentially sell these bumper stickers on consignment to local businesses, tattoo parlors, head shops, or any other independently owned store that might gear toward the fringe. Bumper stickers are great gift-giving ideas for friends and family. Also, a way to wake up your fellow travelers on the path without having to waste energy in tiresome debates. No car? No problem. Bumper stickers will stick to just about anything with a semi-smooth surface. Go to www.justbsme.com and get your bumper stickers today.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Have you ever wondered, what do the stars say for me? Or, will the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month, at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Root. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe FM.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void Radio tonight here on Lighting the Void live on the Fringe FM. It is July the 23rd. We're at the bottom of the second hour of the broadcast. If you're listening on YouTube, the Fringe FM, TalkStream Live, the Paranormal Radio app, the Live 365 app, and wherever you're listening from, thanks for joining us tonight. Well, even though we do video, we're still fairly new doing the show on YouTube. And we are pushing the limits of what YouTube allows us to do. If you can support the show, please do so. We're also still doing the summer sale of tarot readings. I'm doing personal Golden Dawn tarot spread readings for 70% off. That's $30. You can grab them at the Patreon shop. Also, I'm going to be dispersing a Calendly link that's going to make things 10 times easier. So We can book it easier. We don't forget. Nobody's ADHD gets in the way. We have a good time. And everybody that I've met it's been amazing. Like, it really, really makes me want to do an event. So that's something else I've been thinking about, just to hang out with all of you. So you guys are really, really cool. Although some of the readings get a little deep, it seems like everybody's been really cool. So, yeah, if you want to help support, we're doing that summer sale. You can do that too. All right, so I'm not going to put an image of the Qlippoth up here, but we are going to talk about it. So this is from the one of the first books that I ever got on magic. It was the Golden Dawn book, the Black Brick. I think it was like the 5th edition of the Golden Dawn. The one that when most people look at it, they're like, "Ugh," you know. It's going to sound a little snooty, though, like someone's writing a Bible or whatever when I read some of this stuff. But that's, you know, Mathers for you and Regardi and all these people. So it goes on to say this, the Qlippoth. These by they who are unclean and evil, even the distortion and perversion of the Sephirah, the fallen restrictions of the universe, the rays of the coils of the stooping dragon. 11 are their classes, yet 10 are they called. 7 are the heads, and yet 8 head arises. 7 are the infernal palaces, yet do they include 10. In the tree of life by the waters of the river, in the garden of wisdom, is the serpent of the paths. It is the serpent of the celestial Eden. But the serpent of the temptation is that of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the antithesis and the opposer of the other. The red-coiled stooping dragon of the apocalypse, the serpent of the terrestrial Eden. Regard thou therefore the celestial serpent as of brass, glistening with green and gold, the colors of vegetation and of growth. Banish thou therefore the evil and seek the good. And those who would know the life of the ages, those who would follow in the footsteps of the Master, O brother of the order of the Golden Dawn. For as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the son of Adam be lifted up, raised through the balance of strife and of trial, to the pathway of the eternal life. And when like our Master, thou art extended on the tree through suffering and through pain, but let thy countenance be raised up towards the light of the Holy One, to invoke the divine brightness, not for thyself, but for those who have not yet attained unto the pathway, even though they be thy tormentors. I told you it sounds all biblically. Balance between the spiritual and the material, the type of the reconciler, remembered by the symbol of the brazen serpent. Mark thou well the difference between the two serpents. For before the serpent of brass of numbers, the serpent of fire could not stand. But at the fall, the serpent of evil, arising in the tree, surrounded Malkuth, and linked her thus into the outer and the Qlippoth. For this is the sin of the fall, even the separation of the material planes from the Sephirah through the interposition of the coils of the stooping dragon. Thus, therefore, must Malkuth be cleansed, and this is the redemption to come. For also Christ expiated not sin till after he had overcome the temptations. But surely all things in the creation are necessary, seeing that one exists not without the other, and that evil also helpeth the work. For thus the greater and the more intense the darkness, by so much the more doth the light become bright by contrast, and draweth, as it were, increased force from the blackness. I might show you some of these glyphs if you're interested, though. So the Zohar, so this is called the Infernal Habitations. Let me see if I can pull this up here, actually. Get rid of that. Yeah, I'm going to try to do something. Just give me just a second here. And see if I can make you guys see these images. Why not? Because I'm going to be reading about it, so. Actually, I need to do the screen capture thing. Yeah. Maybe it'll show. There we go. All right. This is what I'm reading here. And I'll zoom into it too, if it'll let me. And so you guys can kind of see what I'm seeing. Oh my goodness. No, let's not do that. Let's get rid of this You guys are just not going to have to see my face here. That's okay. All right. So these are the infernal habitations. Let's see if I can zoom in here so you guys on the video can see it better. The Zohar tells us that while God took 6 days to create the world, the infernal regions of man were created at night in the mirror image of the world above them. At the point where both day and night merged, the elements were mixed and unsettled, forming a division in the waters of the first day. Due to this imbalance between the first and the second day, the third was created to finish the work of the second. So you see this kind of onion-looking thing. You got all this Hebrew writing, and then these last 4 pieces of the onion out here: the false sea, the waters of ocean, the water of creation, and the water of tears. So in the diagram above, the first circle shows the water of tears, for the tears are the separation from the light after the fall. It is the cry of Adam separated from the first Adam and the loss of the Shekinah. Remember, the Shekinah is the feminine aspect, or the Holy Spirit, or the love, so to speak, if you want to look at it that way. So that's the first one. What is it? The water of tears? Yeah, the outer one out here. The second circle shows the waters of creation. This represents creation away from the light. It is the creation of the shells of the Qlippoth and the creation of man from Adam. The third circle shows the waters of the ocean, which teem with living creatures, both good and evil, and it is from this that the serpent issues forth. And the fourth circle is the false sea, and is the astral world, the place where deception and reflection are confused. The 4 seas are also reflections of the 4 rivers from the Garden of Eden, and also the 4 worlds, for it is they who must nourish the 7 infernal habitations. On the right side of the diagram, the lesser circles represent the 7 earths. Though these circles are referred to as earths, they should be called states, for they are states of awareness of consciousness that envelop man at different times. They are also reflections of the Sephirah and are part of the garden that man inherited that he could aspire to, for these were left with man when he was banished from the Garden of Eden. In many respects, these were the shells of the kingdoms of Edom, which had been destroyed by their imperfect ability to accept God's light and are but shadows of their former glory. The entire concept here is to show the falsity of matter over the spirit, for the earth represents the material side of man, his passions and desires, which eventually crumble with time, as shown by Arets, the earth furthest away from the present. And some consider the 7 earths, periods of time or evolution, to start with the present, Thable, considered the most perfect of them all, and led to the less perfect worlds, and to final crumble away and decay of Arets. It does make you wonder, like, I've read some books, I think Lon Duquette had a book where he kind of fell into this crazy place in the astral world and saw lots of dark stuff. I'll have to read it again if he'll let me. I might ask him if I can read it on the air or have him on to talk about it. But he saw all kinds of crazy stuff there. He didn't go into detail about it though. So here we're just talking about the infernal habitations, right? So you have 1, which is Arets, which is the dry, crumbling earth. 2, and there's 7 here, I think, yeah. The Adama, or the reddish mold. 3, Gaia, the undulating ground like the side of a valley. And 4, the Nishia, the pasture or meadowland. 5, Zia, or sandy or desert land. 6, Areka, which is earth. And 7, which is Thebul or Chalid, which is, I guess, Mitrid earth and water. So when you read the Bible, like, this might be a clue to something in the Bible when you hear people say, well, for 40 days and 40 nights they went to the desert. Maybe they went to Sia, one of the 7 hells here. Who knows? Or 7 bad habitations. I don't want to call it hells. So on the left-hand side of the diagram are the 7 infernal habitations. These are the experiences one will have passing through the 7 imperfect earths as described above, and some of the names on the left of the are of angelic guardians except the last, after whom these experiences have been named. The guardians prevent anyone from leaving his or her allotted area before the designated time. I ain't even going to pretend to try to read all that. So here are the adverse powers at the feet of the cherub. Sheol, which is the depths of the earth. Abaddon, which is perdition. I guess that's Pataion, the clay of death. Bar Shesketh, the pit of destruction. Selmoth, the shadow of death. Asherimoth, the gates of death. And 7, Gehinnon, which is hell, I guess. Or Gehinnon, hell. So the evil and adverse powers beneath the feet of the 4 cherubs. So here you can see these columns. You have the Sephirah, Kether, Chokmah, Bina, and Gedula. Then you have Gabora, Tifreth, and Netzach. And you have Hod and Yesod and Malkuth. So this is this one actually is like the supernal, but with Gedula. This is just Gabora, Tifreth, and Netzach. This is kind of weird. It doesn't divide it the same way as that we studied into the tree before. But these aren't really triangles either. These are different. The spirits that reside here in this section of Kether, Chokmah, Bina, and Gedula is Lilith, strange beasts, I guess nobody really knows their names, and Machaloth. Gabora, Tifreth, and Netzach have the serpent or Samael. Hod and Yesod, I don't see anything there. Malkuth is Rahab, or a jackass or an ass. And the kingdoms, you have Babel, the Greeks, Medes, and Edom. And in the Qlippoth and the tree, this corresponds with splendor here, the whirling fire here, the great cloud, and the whirlwind. A lot of this stuff doesn't make sense, but if you go back and like read the Bible, you'll start seeing all this stuff in there too. Makes you wonder if they're hiding stuff, you know. So in the Merkabah, we'll just call that Merkabah, in the Merkabah vision of Ezekiel, it is written, "And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a splendor on every side, and Chasmal, the brilliance of the innermost flame in the midst of the fire." These are the 4 cherubic expressions of force, and the evil and adverse powers broken beneath their feet are these 4. Rahab, whose symbol is a woman riding upon an ass. Samael, whose symbol is a terrible demon leaping upon an ox. 3. Machaloth, a form compounded of a woman and a serpent, and she rideth upon a serpent scorpion. And 4. Lilith, a woman outwardly beautiful, but inwardly corrupt and putrefying, riding upon a strange and terrible beast. To these 4 are attributed the 4 kingdoms, as they are also classed under the Sephiroth, as shown. Not even trying to pretend to read all that either. The 12 princes of the Qlippoth. These are the 12 princes of the Qlippoth, who are the heads under the months of the year. These are the names of the 12 princes and tribes of the Qlippoth, who are the heads of the months of the year. I'm probably going to say some of these wrong. That's good, too, because we don't want to invoke them and just screw up the show. How many people left? Did you guys leave? Nah, y'all aren't afraid. That's cool. Berian. I don't even know how to say that. Beriran. So called because they are derived from the 4th evil force via Samael. The black, their colors are dull and black, and their form is that of a dragon lion. And if any of you guys have had visions of the stuff while you're having a shit time in life, or nightmares or whatever, or you've just actually experienced some of this stuff, it may ring a bell. Don't know. Adamaron, whose colors are like dam blood mixed with water in dull yellow and gray. Their form is that of lion lizards. Zeladamaron, whose colors are like limpid blood. Zelil, bronze, and crimson, they are like savage triangular-headed dogs. Shekararon. These are hard to pronounce. I'm going to do these all wrong, probably. Whose colors are black and their form blended of reptiles, insects, and shellfish, such as the crab and the lobster, yet demon-faced withal. Shelhabiron, whose colors are fiery and yellow, and they form like merciless wolves and jackals. Zepheriron, whose colors are like those of earth, and their form is partially living yet decaying corpses. Obiriron, whose colors are like clouds, and their form like gray bloated goblins. Nesheshetharon, whose colors is like copper, and their forms like that of a most devilish and human-headed insect. Neshasharon, whose colors are like serpents, and their form like dog-headed serpents. Dagdigaron, whose colors are reddish and gleaming, and their form like vast and devouring flat-shaped fishes. Behemeron, whose arms are derived from behemoth, and their colors are black and brown, and their forms like those of awful beasts like hippopotamus and an elephant, but crushed flat, as if their skin was spread out flat over the body of a gigantic beetle or cockroach. And Nishimeron, whose colors are of a stagnant, gleaming, watery blue, and their forms like hideous women, almost skeletons, united to the bodies of serpents and fishes. So in the midst of the circle are placed Samael and Asmodai, the symbolic form of the former somewhat like that of the devil of the tarot, but colossal and attenuated. So that of Asmodai is that of a bloated and bestial man, but in a crouching position. And then he's got a footnote here. It says, that one thing is the title of the blood from the last of the 10 plagues of Egypt, and this relates to the ringed formations of colors. At the southeast angle are placed the evil Adam, a goat-headed skeleton-like giant, and a 1,000-headed hydra serpent, and the elder Lilith, wife of Samael, a woman with an ever-changing and distorted countenance. At the northeast angle is Agareth, the daughter of Makaloth, a fiendish witch with serpent hair, enthroned in a chariot drawn by an ox and an ass. At the northwest angle is a gigantic scorpion with a fearful countenance, but standing upright as it were formed of putrefying water. And after him cometh the unnameable one, Abaddon, and his appearance and symbol are of a closely veiled black gigantic figure covered with whirling wheels, and his hand is a vast wheel, whence come as it whirls in multitudes of cat-like demons. And behind him cometh Ma'ama, like a crouching woman with an animal's body crawling along the ground and eating the earth. I think I've actually saw that in a dream once. That's like the one thing that I have saw. At the southwest angle are a winged lion and a winged horse, drawing in like a chariot the youngest, Lilith, the wife of Asmodai. She is dark, a woman to the waist, and a man below it, and she appears as though dragging down with her hands small figures of men into hell. I wonder if he's pulling this off. Yeah. I think he's pulling this off of this glyph here. People asked about this Qlippoth stuff, so I'm going to do it, and then we'll be done with it. All right, so of the 3 evil forces before Samael, this is Kematael, whose form is that of a vast black-headed dragon serpent, and he untieth under him the force of Kether of the internal and averse Sephiroth. The second one, this is Belial, a black bloated man-dragon, and he who denied God, and he that untieth the force of the averse Chokmah. 3, this is Othiel, or Gothiel, a black bloated man-insect horrible of aspect, and his breadth greater than his length, and he untieth the force of the averse Bina. And 4, this is Samael the Black. All of these are of gigantic stature and terrible aspect. Okay. So this picture here that you see, they kind of show the tree like above it, I guess you could say. So you can't really, I don't know how to relate this to the forces or whatever, but we'll go through it anyways. But this is supposedly the evil and adverse tree here. So the evil and adverse Sephiroth. These be the evil and averse Sephiroth contained in the 7 palaces, and these Sephiroth have their place from behind the holiness of the world of Asaya. And Samael, the evil, surroundeth the whole evil Sephiroth, who are thus 11 instead of 10. There are 11 letters in the Hebrew word for Lieutenant Governor Esther. I guess it's chapter 9, verses 3. 11 days from Horeb, and Deuteronomy 1:3. 11 curtains, the Hebrew word I, were A-Y, or I, were the curses of Abal, were the dukes of Edom, and so forth. So in the evil palaces, the first containeth Kether, Chokmah, and Bina, and unto Kether is attributed Kurthiel, which means cut off from God. When the wicked are cut off, so to speak, I guess there's a quote there. When the wicked are cut off, and the symbolic form is that of the black evil giants. Also to Kether belong the Thamael, or Thamael, the bicephalous ones, and their forms are those of dual giant heads with bat-like wings, And they don't have bodies, for they are those that seek continually to unite themselves unto the bodies of other beings and forces. Unto the sphere of Chokmah are referred to the dukes of Edom, and the Zogiel from Og of Bashan, or as it is sometimes written, Gogiel or Ogiel. And they attach themselves unto lying and material appearances, and their form is like that of black evil giants with loathsome serpents twined round them. Man, I can hear it now too, man. If people read this, they're going to say, dude, this is the Nephilim, man, the giants. Well, it makes you wonder, though, like, if you read all these grimoires, how are they so detailed to what these spirits look like? That's the bigger question. So you'd have to really be messing with this stuff to know it, or invoking it to know it, or it's just completely made up. I don't think it's completely made up. But I don't know anybody, not personally, and I talked to several magicians, even occultists, people that don't come in the chat rooms, that we don't, they want to remain like anonymous, so to speak. I asked them, I'm like, hey, have you ever seen any of this stuff that they're talking about here? And most of the time people say no. So maybe you're supposed to just imagine it this way. Unto the sphere of Bina are referred the Satoriel or Heresiel, the concealers and destroyers, whose forms and appearances are as gigantic black veiled heads with horns and hideous eyes seen through the veil, and they are followed by evil centaurs. These are also called the Seriel from Esau because of their hairiness. The second palace contains Chesed, unto which are attributed the Gog Shekelah, the disturbing ones, and their symbolic forms are those of black cat-headed giants. They are also called Aziel, Shirariel, and Agniel. The third palace containeth Geburah, whereunto are attributed Golahab, or burners with fire, otherwise called Zaphiel, and their forms are those of enormous black heads like a volcano in eruption. The fourth palace containeth Tifreth, whereunto are attributed Zamael, and they are great black giants, ever working against each other. The fifth palace containeth Netzach, whereunto are attributed the Goreb Zerek, or despising ravens. Their form is that of hideous demon-headed ravens issuing from a volcano, also called Getzviel. The sixth palace containing Hod, whereunto are referred to the Samael, or deceivers, or jugglers, whose form is that of dull, demon-headed dog-like monsters. This translates as were and has a numerical value of 11 in Deuteronomy. I don't care about all that. Here are the evil chiefs that correspond with each sphere: Kether, Satan, and Moloch; Bina, Beelzebub; Chokmah, Lucifuge; Chesed, Ashtaroth; Geburah. I wish Ryan was here so we could do that thing that we did. Geburah, Asmodeus; Tiferet, Belphegor; Netzach, Baal; Hod, Adramelech; Yesod, Lilith; and Malkuth, Nahama. According to the opinion of some, but these names can hardly be referred to in any one Sephirah, seeing their power extended over many and numberless orders. So this is basically what he's saying is, this isn't exact. And if you're going to go play in hell, you're probably going to see these freaking things all over the place. These, the chiefs. Behemoth and Leviathan are two evil forms, of which the first is the synthesis of the Qlippoth, already described under the head of Behemeron, and the Qlippoth of the months of the year. The Leviathan are, as it were, numberless dragon forms, united together so that each of his scales is like a separate evil serpent. Yeah, so when you get, the only way to really get into learning like all of this stuff, right? And this is the book that I got, that Golden Dawn. That's one of the first magic books I ever got. So the only way to really get into all this stuff and learn it on a deeper level is you got to really study grimoires and like books that talk about these things. And you don't see a lot of these names, and they change too. So this is where it gets weird. This is why I kind of like to stay with just the elements, just work with the elements, work with the tree, do your alchemy stuff once you get above that, and then work with astrology, and you're doing hermetics, right? You're still doing magic and hermetics. But if you personally want to like do old school magic and goetic magic and get into all these different things, it to me, it gets a little like, I know some people are going to disagree, but it gets a little wishy-washy because I've read several grimoires, and a lot of these names are changed, or they're different, or they're spelled different. Even some of the sigils look different. So it's almost like when people go to messing with the dark forces of all these things, it's not as exact as like just the regular tree and doing that kind of work for some reason. But if any of you guys have seen any of this stuff that I just talked about in your dreams or whatever, call in. I'd like to hear about it. Or send me a message at 501-777-5631. The only thing that I used to deal with, and I'll go ahead and say it because I don't deal with it anymore, but when I was a kid, I was extremely scared of the dark. Just as a small kid. Like I was afraid of the dark. Don't know why. Most kids are afraid of the dark, but I had a really crazy fear of it. Like if you were going to send me into a dark place by myself, it wasn't happening. I'd go kicking and screaming, or I'd fight you. And so growing up, even into my 20s, I had this thing that would get in my face. And I don't know how to explain it without sounding crazy, but I'm going to try. I had this thing that would get in my face, and it was so black that I couldn't see shit, right? So if I turn the lights out in the shack right here and I lay down, it's going to be black, right? Until my eyes adjust and the moonlight comes into the door, and then I'll be able to see some shadows and some things and whatever the moonlight's hitting. That's what our eyes do when it gets dark. It's total blackness when you turn the lights out till your eyes adjust. Well, this thing that would get in my face was like total blackness. So I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would just feel the crazy presence, like just a bad presence. And I would stare at the wall when I was a kid because I saw so much crazy stuff while I was awake. I didn't want to look the other way. So staring at the wall was safe for me as a child. But sometimes I would get brave and I'd turn around and I would open my eyes and I could see my room. I could see the hallway. I could see my dad's room across the hallway. Great. But every now and then when I got that bad feeling, I'd open my eyes and there would just be blackness. Blackness to the point where I would freak out and I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see shadows. I couldn't see shades of anything. I couldn't see nothing. It was just the darkest of dark. And it felt like a presence. So I would just freak out until I would flip on the light. And once I flipped on the light, it would be gone, but my heart would still be racing. That only happened once in my house. And I think my father did a prayer when I was a kid and got rid of it. I actually do think that happened. Then I would go stay at this place at my grandmother's, and my other grandmother's, which is across the highway over here. If you guys have been listening to the show for a long time, do you remember that night I had to get up in the middle of the show and go over there with a gun because she thought she heard something? That grandmother's. So when I stayed there when I was a kid, none of the kids liked to sleep in the back room. They all got a bad feeling back there. And it was I think it was an add-on to the house or whatever. That house is old. My grandmother owned it and moved out. Then my mother lived there and moved out. Then my grandmother moved back in. I could say that there had been some pretty dark things that have happened there. Lots of, at least while my mother lived there, lots of abuse and weird things. But when I went into that back room, I saw that black thing that I'm telling you about that got in my face several times. I got to the point where I wouldn't go back in that back room. And it was plenty light. Like if you kept the door open, you could see the hallway because my grandpa used to leave the hallway light on when he watched TV. He stayed up all night. You could see everything. But there were several times when I woke up and my eyes would open. I'd open my eyes and look, and it wasn't like my eyes were adjusting. It was just total freaking blackness, almost like something was smothering me. It was crazy, and I knew that it was something there. So when I read these books about the Qlippoth, and the only thing that I see in common with what he's talking about with all these beings is just blackness. That kind of makes sense, right? The only thing I've ever saw in my life with my eyes open while I was awake, though, was a little short, squatty, fat dude that was standing between me and my father's room. And I don't see him mentioning any of that stuff there. Maybe a Lilith attacked me in my sleep once, because I got attacked by these women, and when I was a kid, I got attacked by dark-headed, long-haired, like Elvira-looking women when I was a kid, and they would do things to me while I was asleep. Let's just put it that way. As I was a child, I haven't had no dark experiences as an adult. The last experience I had with that blackness was in my 20s at my friend's house. Same thing, laying on the couch. I gotten really drunk, and we came back from the club. I got really drunk, and it's almost like I felt that presence again. I was sleeping on his couch. I felt that presence again. And then I turned around, and there it was again. And I know I could see everything in their house. It was like a double-wide trailer. I could see all the way to the end of it almost, or at least to their room. But when I turned around, I saw that blackness again. I never really thought about it. I always just thought I was freaking myself out until one day my grandmother told me this story. So my mom died when I was little, when I was 12 or whatever. But I guess she had visited my grandmother had crazy stories like this, but I guess she had visited my grandmother once. And my grandmother would claim, and I'm not calling her a liar, she never lied to me, but she claimed she saw things and heard things. And one time she started talking about this black being that covered her. Like, she was laying in bed. She said she felt something come in the house, that she felt it come into the kitchen, and she felt it move in the back room. And while she was laying in bed on her back, this thing kind of like hovered over her. And she said it was like really large and black. And when she started talking about this, it started freaking me out, because I didn't want to tell her, oh, the damn thing's still around, you know, because she's big and Christian and happy, and I ain't going to talk about that stuff to her. But once it got over my grandmother's face, it looked at her. And she never explained, like, what the eyes looked like or anything. But she said it looked at her and said, "You're not who I came for." And immediately right there, she knew that it was coming for my mother. Like it was some kind of demon of alcohol or gluttony or something. And maybe addiction, maybe something like that. And not too long after that, I think it was just a few days after that, my mom died, right? And that's where my mother used to sleep, in that room, same spot. Do I believe that really happened? Man, I don't know. I think I've talked to a lot of women in my life that claim to be able to see things and experience things. And most dudes I talk to don't. I'm not saying dudes can't do these things, see things or whatever. Like, I obviously did in my sleep, right? But it just seems like a lot of women have easier abilities to tap into, especially the older the woman. Please don't take offense to that, but easier abilities to tap into things. The freakiest thing that ever happened to me. And I'm not sure I want to tell this story, but on a magical level, the scariest thing that ever happened to me was when I was younger and I was on drugs. I was doing a lot of bad stuff, you know, but I started having panic attacks it seemed like for no reason. Obviously not no reason, but I started having bad panic attacks when I was like 19, 20 something. I thought I was going to die. I was having crazy chest pains. I started freaking myself out. I didn't want to do any of the drugs that I was doing. And know I'm freaking some people out, like right before they go to sleep, but I got to tell the story, and then we'll get out of here. So I decided I was done with, after you've been to the hospital 3 or 4 times, and the doctors are like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. And you feel like you're having a heart attack, you want to go home. So I'm like, I want to go home. I want to go home. And finally, one of my friends, his name is Junior, he took me home. Toughest dude in the group. Toughest guy. Probably the toughest guy. And he's driving me home. We're riding in this green Ford. We get to the bottom of the hill up here. We're coming down the hill next to the ranch on the right, and he just jerks the truck over. And when he jerks the truck over, I'm looking at him like, what the hell? Like he's freaking out or something. Yeah, he's on drugs, but he's freaking out. And he starts crying. Now, I've never seen this dude cry, And he was like, I can't drive the rest of the way. You're going to have to drive the rest of the way. And I was like, why? What's up? What's going on? And he said, I can't. He wouldn't tell me. I finally pushed him. I'm like, dude, just tell me what's going on. I don't mind driving. We're only a mile from the house, but what's going on? He said, man, I'm going to sound crazy, but when I got to the bottom of the hill, there was just blood all over the windshield. And he jerked like when he pulled over too. So he saw something or something freaked him out. At the time, I thought that, okay, well, he's been up for a few days, you know what I mean? Like he's just seeing stuff. So whatever. I drove home. He let me go. I'm in the midst of like, not just anxiety, but what do they call it? Agoraphoria or some shit. Like I'm having post-traumatic stress from all the panic attacks. I literally thought I was going crazy. So after that happened, after he said he saw blood on the windshield, lots of weird things started happening. I got clean. I was like easily because I was scared of everything. I wouldn't even eat sugar. I was crazy, man. I thought everything in the world would kill me. Sugar, caffeine, leaving the house, going too far down the road somewhere was going to something bad was going to happen. Just everything triggered a freaking panic attack for some reason. And I thought, man, this is it, dude. I've lost my shit. Like I'm done. But this caused me to go to my grandmother's house for comfort. Because my grandmother here on my dad's side she's more of a hard ass. She's just very loving woman, but wouldn't nurture you too much. You start feeling sorry for yourself, she'd smack you around. My pop, he's another hard ass, right? It's all in your head. I don't know what's wrong with you. It's all in your head. Okay, whatever. So I go to my mother's grandmother. She's a very sweet woman. She was always been there for me. Even though my mother wasn't, she was. And one day we were outside telling stories. And she's telling me the story about my great-grandma Van Pelt. That was my great-grandmother's name, Van Pelt. And she said that she pulled out into the road one day, because we were talking religious stuff back then, right? And they were real religious, took us to Assembly of God, Pentecostal churches, all the stuff, big into the spirit. But she said one day she pulled out into traffic with my grandma Van Pelt. And when she pulled out, a diesel truck was coming straight at them like they were going to die. They were dead, done for. And grandma did this like Hebrew prayer, which is magic, right? Hebrew prayer of blood or something, some kind of Hebrew prayer. I forget the name of it. It's magic. They don't call it magic, but it's magic. And she ducked her head, and she said she grabbed the steering wheel and ducked her head and did this prayer, felt this big gush of wind, and looked up, and then great-grandma Van Pelt was freaking out, right? She said, did you see that, Ann? Did you see that? Like, that truck was going to hit us, and then all of a sudden there was blood all over the windshield, and it seemed like it just went right through us. When she told me that, I never told my grandmother what happened with Junior, number one. Never, right? When she told me that, she described it almost exactly as the same way that Junior described it. And then one day, it just freaked me out so much, man. Like to even, when she said that, I was freaked. It took me like almost a week or more to talk to her about this. So one day, I finally told her, right? I said, Grandma, I got to tell you something. I that story you told me about Grandma Vempel happened to me. And she's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, I was going down the road, before I got off drugs. It was a month ago when I came back home. I pretty much disappeared from my family. But anyways, I came back home. I got off the drugs. And on the way home, my buddy Junior said he saw, and I wish he was listening. He'd call and confirm this for sure, but said he saw blood all over the windshield. And it freaked him out so much that he started crying, like he could barely move. And my grandma was just staring at me like intently, She got that old mountain vibe mama look to me, And I said, so when you told me that about Grandma Vampel, it made me wonder, like, what prayer did she do? Did you do some kind of weird, Hebrew thing? Like, because they were big into the Hebrew stuff. And she said, son, about 3 days before you came home, me and your grandfather did a prayer of some kind of Hebrew prayer. I don't know if you guys know it. If you know it, call in, send me a message, whatever. But some kind of Hebrew prayer called the bead of thorns or whatever, some kind of prayer like that. It's something about that it has to do with, and I wish she was still alive. I'd just ask her. But it has to do with someone that's so lost that it takes something bad to happen to them. Doesn't kill them, but it takes something bad to them for them to wake up. And I was thinking, holy shit. Like, my grandmother and my grandfather did Hebrew magic on me. And it seems like wackadoo, even to this day talking about it. But the way they both described those stories, and without me telling them what happened, and everything that happened up to that event, it seemed like it was either magic or I was protected in some kind of way. Now, with that being said, this calls into question, number one, should you pray over people like that? We've had discussions on this show about that, because if I could go back into time and ask them not to do that prayer, I would have, because I was on my way home anyways. But I think that prayer triggered something, like some kind of psychic attack, maybe some kind of magical thing to happen, or some kind of coincidence to happen in my life to where, I don't know, man. I think about this stuff all the time, but that was torture. Now, granted, I was cleaner and healthier and more in shape than I'd ever been in my life. A year after that day, I think I weighed like 180 pounds solid. I didn't eat anything crappy. I didn't drink anything crappy. I didn't smoke cigarettes like I do now. I didn't do anything bad. I had to overcome this crisis of fear every single day. I was having panic attacks every single day. If you would have saw me back then, you would have been going down the highway and you'd have looked over to the left and seen my ass driving while I'm breathing in a bag. That's a scary... I was popping a rubber band on my wrist and breathing into a bag, right? That's a scary thing. But slowly but surely, I started facing every fear. Go down the road a little bit. Okay, drive to town. Go to Little Rock. Now go to Memphis by yourself. And it started going away. And at that time, I was happier than I'd ever been. But if I had to go back, I would say, please don't do that. Please don't say some kind of prayer to the universe or to Jesus, or say some Hebrew magical prayer to get me to do what you want me to do. Because I had made up my mind. I had my own will at the time. I was coming home anyways. Something to think about. Really. Like, I don't believe that you should do anything against anybody else's will, physically or magically. Like, love is free. It's a free choice. Anything outside of that choice, or giving someone the ability to choose for themselves, is like the opposite of love. That's why lying is like stealing. It's the same thing. If you lie to people, they don't know the truth, so therefore they can't make the right choice for themselves most of the time. Instead of knowing all the truth so that they can make their own free will choice, that's love. So it's kind of a philosophic discussion. If you know someone's doing bad, or, they're in a bad place, should you pray that something happens to them so that they come back to a good place? I don't know, man. The reason why I say that is because I got to the point I felt so crazy at that time in my life. It's the only time in my life where my vain ass thought about ending my life. I felt so crazy. It was torture. Complete psychological torture. It was almost like every day I was walking in a nightmare. I never knew when I was going to have one of those stupid attacks. I never knew. Nothing seemed real. I felt like I was in some alternate reality all the time. I felt completely tortured. And this went on for like 2 years. Did that happen all because of a prayer? I don't know. But to this day, anytime I'm afraid of something, or anytime people start getting fearful, I think I have so much trauma from that place of just giving in to that fear. And all the torture that I went through and the suffering that I went through from being afraid, unconsciously and consciously, that anytime I get around people that give into their fear too much, instead of dealing with it in like a normal person would, by balancing it out, I have this weird tendency to be just like, get away from me. Not trying to be a dick, but just get away. You're in this crazy fear state. You're going to manifest this crap. It's going to spread like wildfire, and I just get it away from me. So even now when I get around people that are like super, and it's not healthy, right? I'm just warning you. I get around people that are super pessimistic, or they say things like, well, that's not the way the real world works, or whatever, and they're pessimistic about life, relationships, love, or they're just constantly trying to find what's the worst case scenario all the time. The reason why I'm that way is because of the trauma that I went through with all that stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with those people or their rational fears of whatever. It's the trauma that I went through with that stuff. And that is, despite all of the magical texts that I've read and all of these names and these like visions of all these dark things, I feel like I could face any of those demons after going through that. And I have some of them. But I haven't seen any of them. And then when I listen to, again, Robert Monroe, Thomas Campbell, William Buellman, who's some other big, Robert Bruce, all these, well, Robert Bruce might have seen them because he's kind of an occultist too, but all these people that travel consciously out of body, they see weird stuff. Hell, they've even seen serpents that are twined together and things like that. But when I read these books that are so specific about what these entities look like and their names and all this other stuff, it just doesn't come up. So I think, long story short, before we end this, because we're going to jump out of here a little early, and we're going to end this whole tree of life kind of thing. And hopefully, at least for like doing shows and reading books about it and stuff like that, to this extent, hopefully people will understand this whole system a little bit more and realize that it's a co-creative thing. Like none of these trees or these beings or these elementals and all these things that we believe in that are in these realms probably wouldn't exist if we didn't create them, or if we didn't give them names. That this whole thing is a co-creative process. And that thing that happened between me and my grandmother, the reason why I think that happened is because both of our Christian upbringings, our egregoric energy and belief in this stuff so much was there. Plus we're connected ancestrally and through our blood and all this other stuff. So maybe it affected me a little bit more. I don't know. Do you feel? Thanks. At least Honey says, I feel like I have a better understanding. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I did to understand the tree better was I just made little flashcards back in the day when I started this stuff. I would write, like Kether, what color it is, the God name, the angels, and all this stuff, and then I would put it on one side of the card, and then I would do like that old school thing. I did it with the Hebrew letters too. I just made a bunch of flashcards and then would just look at it and then guess and flip it over and keep doing it until I memorized them. Some of you guys could probably do that overnight because there's only really 10 spheres, but we haven't got into the 22 paths or anything like that. If you want to brush over the stuff quickly, though, I do have some like videos that I made on the regular videos, not the live videos, but just the regular videos, like mystery school stuff. And I use the tarot to talk about it because inside this tarot deck, the whole school of magic exists inside this tarot deck. The 4 elements, the planets, the astrological energies, the Kabbalah, the Sephirah, the paths on the tree, the 4 worlds, everything that we've talked about in the entire school of the occult actually exists inside this tarot deck. So the tarot itself, without the temple and the everything and all the stuff that comes with it, even though that stuff's what I like to do, but without all that stuff exists right here inside these cards. So you could practice magic, even traditionally, in an old school way, with just a tarot deck. If you knew what you were doing. Some candles, some prayers, a few meditations, and a tarot card. It's pretty cool, actually. And I'm working on some, like I said, I've been working on some stuff for a while for this. And when I release it, it's been a long time coming, but I hope you guys will enjoy it. All right, so we're going to get out of here. Crazy night talking about the dark tree, that kind of stuff. But we had to do it. If we're going to talk about all the light stuff, we got to talk about the dark stuff too. And if you want a reading from me, you can get it. Just click on the Patreon link there. You can get it in the shop. You can get it on the Fringe website, or you can just donate the $30 and say, hey, I want to help out with the whatever, the summer special thing. I'll send you a link from Calendly, and we'll do an hour session or an hour reading with you. Hope I didn't freak you guys out too much tonight. I like talking about the dark stuff, but it's necessary sometimes, right? All right. Good night, y'all. Sweet dreams. See you tomorrow night.